Hello and welcome. Welcome to this webinar on European marketplaces, the launch of our European marketplaces report, sponsored by Marketplacer. I'm Paul Skeldon. I'm one of the editors and analysts at RetailX. I delved into the world of marketplaces and pulled together this report, and I'm going to give a brief sort of taste of some of the things we were looking for and what we found, so you can get a flavour of what's in this year's European Marketplaces report, so that you can then download it and enjoy it in its fulsome glory. I'm joined today by Luke Hilton from Marketplacer. Luke, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have a little discussion at the end after I've gone through some of our data about sort of what the view really from the ground is as to sort of how this sort of translates into the real world. So, Luke, as I say, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, if you could just tell us a little bit, for those that don't know, just a little bit about Marketplacer and what Marketplacer does.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Paul. Great to be here. So my name is Luke Hilton. So I'm the VP of Solution Engineering at Marketplacer. If you're picking up the accent, yes, Australian, guilty as charged. So Marketplacer is an Australian company that is set up shop within the UK. And so my role in the business is we work with a lot of prospective customers, retailers, for example, that are wanting to undertake a marketplace strategy and help them really understand what best practice integration looks like between Marketplace and a retailer systems. And Marketplace is really, as I said, we're a software as a service platform, and people use us for transforming or doing a curated range extension or undertaking a marketplace strategy.
Brilliant stuff. Excellent. Well, excuse me. I look forward to having a more detailed chat with you after I've just gone through some of the data, because like I say, I think it's really good to, for me who sits in an office analysing, in theory, it's good to hear from people like yourself who actually understand what's going on a much more sort of practical level. So I'm going to just have a little talk about the report that's out now. There'll be a link at the end of this webinar so you can download it. But essentially what we set out to do in this year's report, we do a report into marketplaces every year, is to look at the role of marketplaces within Europe, particularly how they are used now by retailers, particularly the largest 100, and in some instances in the data, the largest 1,000 retailers across Europe, as to sort of how the role they're playing, because marketplaces, as you all know, are a much more entrenched part now of the e-commerce model. They're not necessarily a sort of standalone sort of thing on their own. They're now sort of part of it, as we shall see. So within that, we assess the size and performance of Europe's leading marketplaces, so who they are, what they do, the kind of traffic levels that they do, which markets, both verticals and geographic, they operate in, to get a taste of who they are and what they do. We then, as I say, looked at how the RetailX largest 100 retailers use these marketplaces, whether they're having sort of a branded presence, or they're selling sort of end of line, or that they're sort of setting up their own marketplaces in a lot of instances, and how that interaction happens. And we profiled 25 of the leading marketplaces by traffic in Europe to get a more granular view of how those largest 100 retailers use them, and what that means in terms of their performance, how the marketplaces themselves differ in terms of how they reach their audience and what they offer to their merchants that are selling on them. So that's a sort of snapshot of what the report sort of in essence is about. The profiles look a bit like that. That's just eBay. I just picked out at random. We talk there in the text about what eBay does for the retailers, how that performance sort of translates into how eBay has performed, where it's going, that sort of thing. We also look at things like its traffic levels and its share price, etc. And the data there roughly looks at things like the size of brands and retailers that sell on there, whether they have a branded presence or not, what verticals they're in, where they're HQ'd, all that kind of thing. So it's quite a detailed breakdown of the way the marketplace itself works and how the retailers that sell on it sell. So to put things in a bit of perspective, what do we mean in this instance by marketplaces? I think these days we do actually have to now define what we count as a marketplace, because it is getting more grey, I think, in terms of where a marketplace sits within the sort of e-commerce model. Essentially, we've looked at generalist and specialist marketplaces. So generalist marketplaces would be people like Amazon, of course, who sell everything. Pretty much, as opposed to a growing crop of more specialist retailers, or marketplaces rather, such as Zalando, which focuses very much on fashion, though within that specialism of fashion, it started to sell things allied to fashion, such as cosmetics to some degree and some home furnishings and stuff like that. Also other like new-ish specialists such as Vinted, who sell vintage second-hand clothing, which is also becoming quite a big part of the e-commerce model. So they're the generalist specialist sort of split. Within that, we look at marketplaces as being either pure marketplaces, which are those that are just a marketplace. They are essentially a platform to connect buyers and sellers. They may offer also shipping and some of those sorts of things, but they don't sell their own branded products typically. And they're not involved really in terms of being a retailer at all. They are a platform and an enabler for selling. Some examples there: Alibaba, Allegro, Temu, who's fairly new to the market and operates in a sort of slightly different way, but is still, for the sake of our analysis, considered a pure marketplace. The other split with the marketplaces, that those that aren't pure marketplaces are those that are mixed and retailer marketplaces. Now, mixed marketplaces, exemplified, of course, by the likes of Amazon, Bol.com, that sell a broad range of goods, or they can be specialists, but within that they do sell their own branded items in all or some of the verticals that they offer. Retailer marketplaces sort of operate in a similar way. They're often mixed because they're selling own brand, not always, however. But their marketplaces have been set up and run by retailers themselves. Prime example being Decathlon, and of course it's done to increase the sort of reach, rapidly increase the reach of these retailers into sort of allied fields. It's a way of growing inventory, growing customer base without sort of having to do some of the vast investment in setting it all up. It's a way of just pulling together other allied products, as we shall see in the rest of this presentation, and particularly the discussion with Luke afterwards. It's particularly vigorous part of the market now, the retailer marketplace model, and it's quite interesting what impact that might have, I think, on e-commerce generally and on the existing and traditional marketplace. It's interesting times, and you know, it's an interesting time to pull this report together for that reason. So, before we get on to the actual data, I think it's also worth mentioning social media. I'm focusing here on TikTok Shop because we did profile them in this report, because they've set up a shop. Facebook has a marketplace also, but TikTok particularly interested me because it's come from sort of 0 to 60 very sort of rapidly over the past couple of years, and actually has added the word shop to its TikTok Shop offering. Now, we don't have the same sort of data on the brands, but the basic reach that TikTok has is huge. And I think the graph there on the right is the most telling. Yes, it lags like everything way behind the visits that Facebook gets as an overall website, not just its marketplace. But look, it's very, very close there to Amazon, and it's ahead of eBay, and it's ahead of AliExpress. So already it's got the traffic, if not the sales. So I think we have to be in mind that perhaps while retailer marketplaces are reshaping the marketplace market, we are going to see another upheaval as things like social media platforms start to become part of the marketplace model too. So, looking at the marketplaces that we assessed, traffic to marketplaces and purchases by channel, marketplaces lead the way. 35% of online purchases are made now on marketplaces. It's not more than half, obviously, but it is by far the largest single chunk. That's where people are going to buy stuff. Way more so than online for supermarkets, that sort of thing. Direct-to-consumer brands, it outstrips that. Retailer websites, it's way ahead of that. Interesting social on-app purchasing and in games and the metaverse, things like that, also is ahead of retailer sites. But It's marketplaces that are being particularly attractive to consumers. And typically it's consumers across age ranges. Sure, baby boomers lag a little bit there. They're to some degree not as online perhaps as the other generations, but between sort of Generation X, millennials, and Gen Z, it's pretty much an even amount. It's roughly 3/4 of them are using marketplaces globally to buy a significant amount of their online purchases. So marketplaces are a pan-generational thing. This isn't something that is focused on, you're sort of just on your Gen Zs or even your Gen Alphas and those who are drawn particularly to social media, which may also drive the social media side of it becoming a marketplace. But it's unique in many ways that it is now a way that pretty much everybody tends to shop. Even more than half of baby boomers, even though they lag behind the others, it's more than half of them are using marketplaces. So amongst the largest 100 retailers in our analysis, it's quite a complicated Sankey chart to digest on a slide, and suggest maybe you sort of download the report and look at it in more detail. But essentially here, web traffic to the largest 100 in Europe by the category of vendor that they go to, 85% of that is going to marketplaces. And 62% of the businesses that are in the largest 100 retailers in Europe are also marketplaces. So marketplaces are already across Europe dominating e-commerce. It's quite startling how this has grown and changed over the past sort of probably 2 or 3 years, let alone the past sort of 5 or 10. The marketplaces are taking a bigger and bigger chunk and becoming bigger and bigger retailers in their own right. So there's a lot more analysis of what this means in the report, but that gives you a sort of snapshot of where we're at with how marketplaces sit within the largest 100 as retailers. Across Europe, this is by sort of traffic and by sort of categorized business, but the picture is pretty much the same. If you look at the one on the right, typically you can see that really the share of web traffic going to these sort of marketplace sites is huge across Western, Eastern, Southern, and largely Central Europe. The only place that again sort of stands out as being behind is Northern Europe. The Scandinavian countries don't seem to have embraced the marketplace model to quite the same degree. As to why this is, there's various theories. I mean, one of them is the sort of disparate sort of and smaller populations. It's just not as viable. I think culturally, there's also a sort of they're drawn more to their local and known brands, and nobody really has sort of hit the market in sort of Northern Europe to any great degree with a marketplace model. I think, again, because perhaps the market isn't as lucrative as it might be. I suspect that will change. I mean, still a large proportion of it is. I mean, that 68% is quite high. I mean, that's more than 2/3. But it's not in the 80s like it is in all the other regions. It's particularly popular, as you can see, in Southern Europe. That's skewed, as we'll see in subsequent slides, particularly by Spain. It really does sort of like stand out as a huge marketplace user. But I think it is, it's still part of the sort of European model. Western Europe and Eastern Europe are also fairly equally split. Western Europe, I think, because they were earlier adopters of e-commerce and have evolved into the marketplace model. Eastern Europe, I think, for completely the opposite reason, much newer to e-commerce, have seen the marketplace model as a swift way to get e-commerce running. I think some key entrepreneurs in Eastern Europe have seen this and have really driven it forward. So marketplaces are particularly popular in Eastern Europe, which I think sort of is indicative again of like, right now, this is the sort of platform of choice for e-commerce. So again, looking at the countries, I won't go into a lot of detail. Obviously, you can see there's a lot in there. Depending on how you split the data, the number of marketplaces within the largest by country, the most is in Belgium, funnily enough, but Spain, very high up there. Share of total web traffic directed to marketplaces within the largest 100 by country, Spain, as I said, is way out in front. Germany is very high up as well, equaling Spain. Interestingly, the UK market comes very far down on both of those lists, which did surprise me because there is a huge sort of interest and usage of marketplaces amongst UK consumers. But relative to all the other ways they shop, it's not as dominant. And I think that's because we have a very healthy e-commerce market in the UK that is quite diverse. There's a lot of marketplace use, but there is also a lot of D2C use. There's a lot of retailer website use. So I think sort of the marketplace model isn't as strong here numerically because e-commerce is very strong in its entirety. So that was sort of quite interesting. Again, you can see towards the bottom of the list all the Scandinavian countries, Northern Europe, as we just discussed, are just not as into the marketplace model as we are elsewhere. So that's kind of what we found. There's a way more detail, obviously, in the report. I don't want to bore you with all the details here. I want you to download it and read it at your leisure and tell us what you think. I think sort of looking ahead for maybe what we might be finding in next year's report when we sit and do this is that there's going to be a growth in niche and specialist marketplaces. I said at the beginning, the likes of Vinted. There is a growing interest in second-hand and vintage and that kind of thing, which lends itself to a marketplace model. I think we're going to see more of that. I think we're also going to see a lot more specialist food retailers that act as marketplaces. Carrefour in France is one of the retailers that set up its own marketplace to sell much more specialist foods from specialist suppliers, sort of separate to its supermarket business. For example, I think we're going to see sort of marketplaces being set up that focus particularly on that sort of specialist food. Similarly, I think specialist health and beauty, particularly ecologically minded products, ethically sourced products, natural products, those kind of things. I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think we're also going to see a lot of startup marketplaces that find niches where this model works. I think alongside that, some of these niche and specialists and startups are going to be more disruptive and the disruptor marketplaces. I think we've already seen from China, Temu and Shein certainly in the UK market, start to disrupt that fashion model. They do stuff like so cheap, I can't possibly see how it economically works, but it seems to. In China, Pinduoduo is also very popular and exciting. And I think the idea of some of these direct from manufacturer sites where you're sort of using a marketplace model to let people bid to a manufacturer to buy goods. You get enough people who want the same thing. You get it for a set price from the manufacturer and cutting out the retailer altogether. Quite a niche interest. Again, very popular in China. I think we might see some of those sorts of models, or at least people trying to start that, particularly around specialist and niche verticals, I think, because it lends itself to that. And I think, again, the marketplace platform makes that a much more viable and interesting way to do it. I think, as I said, around TikTok Shop, we are going to see more social media becoming marketplaces. I think to some degree you can look at some of them. TikTok Shop, certainly, Facebook Marketplace, Instagram, as being quasi marketplaces anyway. They operate sort of like marketplaces, though some of the economics and some of the ways they do it are very different. I think we're going to find them lumped into this marketplace model, and they're going to be part of the evolution and development of marketplaces. I think, again, focusing on China, I know it's not in Europe, but I think it's an interesting place to look for how people use stuff. And I think particularly as things like Temu and Shein are sort of making their presence felt in markets like the UK and the US, we are going to see some of these Chinese ideas grip the younger end of the market. And I think we're starting to see this idea of the super app perhaps being born. To my mind, no, it's something that there are definitions of it. To my mind, the super app is really an app that does more than one core thing. And I think sort of, WeChat in China does all sorts of things. It's a social site, it's a messaging site. It has a payment function. It also has a shopping aspect, an e-commerce aspect to it. I think we're going to start to see these things come together. TikTok Shop being a sort of proto super app in many ways, because it combines the social media functionality with the ability to shop, and it brings the two together. And I think that creates some interesting new ways of selling stuff. It's as simple as that. So I think those three things are going to be particularly interesting in the next 12 months as we get to sort of the end of 2024. I think we're going to see that the marketplace market has shifted again into a more specialist marketplace. There's going to be more stuff like around social, and there's going to be more startup, disruptor, new entrants doing stuff We may even well be having some sort of super app. I think on a technical side, we are going to see a lot more AI recommendations that's going to get super granular in its personalization, and particularly is going to be used not just by marketplaces. Obviously, it's going to be used by all retailers to find ways to do recommendations to anonymous customers, because that's in some ways a holy grail, really. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, because I think that in the coming year we're going to see AI becoming much more focused. There's going to be, it won't just be Chat GPT that will write you something about whatever you ask it. It's going to be AIs and chatbots that are specifically trained for very specific tasks, which I think is going to be seen particularly in driving things like voice search and voice commerce, and better customer service. And I think that's going to work across marketplaces, but I think it's going to work everywhere. The thing where it's particularly relevant, I think, to marketplaces is that marketplaces allow the building of this technology once that can then be used by many of the sort of sellers that use that marketplace. It in some ways democratizes sort of AI and specialist chatbots and voice commerce and all of those things. So it's been an interesting year looking at it since 2022 to 2023. I think come 2024, we're going to have some really interesting things happening around the marketplace market with like quite sort of major repercussions and ripples being felt across e-commerce. So that's really a whistle-stop tour through some of the key points in the report. I'd like to bring Luke back in at this point, because I think you've heard enough from me rabbiting on about the theory. It would be interesting to hear what some of the sort of practice is, how it works sort of practically. So, Luke, I mean, the research sort of shows that there's been a shift to using marketplaces, first of all, well, among consumers and retailers, but looking first of all, just briefly at the consumer side, more consumers than ever are using it across all sorts of age ranges. What's been your experience on the ground about that? What's attractive about marketplaces to consumers, and is there, do you feel, a shift towards more consumers wanting to shop in a marketplace model?
Yeah, well, 100%. So, and I mean, look, firstly, honored to be a sponsor of the European Marketplaces report. And, again, it's something that we have consumed, as a software vendor, and it's given us lots of insights about this new region that we've entered as well. But I guess with Marketplace as a platform, the majority of our customers are actually probably put in the category of mixed marketplaces. They're really retailers or brands, and they're undertaking a curated range extension strategy. But I mean, it makes a hell of a lot of sense. I mean, I'm a consumer. I do a lot of shopping on marketplaces myself, and the reason I do it is convenience. Like, I'm a creature of habit. I buy my groceries from Tesco, and I always shop there. So a business like that moving into range extension, it's convenient for me. I can get my groceries and I can get additional products. And it's all got the benefit then of through someone I trust as a starting point. So there's the convenience, trust, and obviously repetition. I shop there constantly, so it's much easier to do that. And marketplaces are really facilitating that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I too. I mean, I don't know. I fear it might be a sort of man habit that shopping on Amazon's just easier. I can pick up my phone, tap in whatever I want, and buy it. But I think my kids, particularly, they shop around, but they're mainly shopping around on different marketplaces. So, from my real world experience without my analyst hat on, yeah, I agree. I think it's the convenience is now sort of infiltrating everywhere to all users. Looking more at kind of how retailers, brands use marketplaces, I think first of all, the pure marketplace model, those that are literally just platforms for selling goods, what role do they play? Do you think that they still have a strong role to play in the market, Luke?
Are you talking about a pure marketplace like a Temu, or what are you talking about there?
Well, I think I'm talking about the ones, those pure marketplaces that don't sell their own brand stuff. They are purely, really just a platform that facilitates connecting a buyer and a seller. So yeah, Temu, eBay, yeah, those sorts of people, the ones that don't sell their own brand stuff.
I think, yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, we do have some of our marketplace customers that are purely third-party marketplaces, and there's 100%. For me, their ability, what makes them successful or not will come down to ultimately the customer experience. Um, you know, uh, it's always interesting. It's a much easier conversation for marketplacer to have with a prospective customer when they're an existing retailer selling online. They understand the realities of commerce. They understand reverse logistics. They understand what is involved in having to have a great service offering. So again, and then secondly, you're as good as the products that you have on your website, whether it's your first party or your third party range extension as well. So again, yeah, I mean, I 100% think there's a place for what we call mega marketplaces or traditional marketplace models for sure. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think what came out of the research for me was that there are still quite a few pure marketplaces, and some of them are more specialist now. But what I think is was interesting was that there is a shift towards these retailer run marketplaces. Is that something you're seeing yourself, and how do you sort of see that kind of playing out?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, there's already the obvious shift with consumers shopping on marketplaces. So, I mean, we work with some of the biggest retailers around the world, and it's not often that they're coming to us because they want to turn into Amazon or they want to turn into, they're really looking at doing a curated range extension. So an interesting one is we work with a retailer in Australia called Woolworths. It's the Southern Hemisphere's probably largest grocer, and they, like very similar range to a Tesco or a Sainsbury's. You can buy your groceries and your fresh produce, but they also sell some smaller items. Like for example, they can sell Lego, and you can in your delivery with your groceries, you can get some little kind of boxes of Harry Potter Lego, as an example. But what they're really doing with Marketplacer is they're extending their range using our marketplace to offer a full range of Lego as well. So now you can also obviously get your groceries, but you can also get your the DeLorean or the Death Star and all these different kinds of high value, harder products to fulfill. So it's really interesting there. So, but for a retailer, I guess there's super clear benefits. I mean, they can extend their range for starters. They've got less capital outlay, 100%, than in comparison to first party inventory. They're not needing to warehouse the product. Third parties are fulfilling them on behalf of them. And really they're taking a commission on the sale if they're using a marketplace model. So there's tons of upside in that as well. But I think the interesting thing for us as well is super obvious benefits to a retailer. Add more product, make yourself more relevant to more, potentially tap into a new customer base or get your existing customers coming back to you more regularly, growing average order value and growing purchase frequency. So so I guess there's lots of benefits there to a traditional retailer.
Are you
For
seeing are
sure.
you seeing any uptake among non-traditional retailers?
Yeah, very much so. And it's interesting. I've done a lot of work with media companies since being at Marketplacer, and I'm an old dog. I've been working 47. I've been working in commerce for 17 years now. But I've been with Marketplacer 3 years now. But we've got Qantas. Qantas is an airline that's very non-traditional, but they had made the decision at one stage to build a marketplace and have product, but they were acting more like a first party marketplace in the sense of they were buying stock, warehousing it themselves. And, so now we power their purely third party marketplace. So you can go there to it's marketplace.qantas.com, and you can use your points to either buy product or you can do a mix of points and payment as well. You can earn points, you can burn points. And it's interesting. We've seen them actually selling very high value products like Vespers and things like that. And I mean, it's a big
Wow.
win for Qantas. They're providing a
How
great
so?
value.
What's the upside for Qantas? Why is Qantas wanting to do this? Is it about loyalty?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about Qantas has got a lot of customers around the world, members to their loyalty program with lots of points. They, I mean, just to be frank, they much prefer them to be spending those points on products from third party and taking a commission on the sale, than using those same points for getting free flights, as an example.
Mm.
Or
Mm.
free flights. But yeah, so that's really interesting. And so
That
Qantas
is.
and loyalty is an interesting one, but even things like telco as well. Telecommunications it's quite consistent. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You go to a store or a website and you buy your new mobile handset. You might get a tablet, or get your mobile broadband as well. But we're working with Optus, which is one of Australia's largest telcos. And they've branched out from not only having on a website first-party product, as I said, mobile phones, broadband, and things like that, but they've also kind of extended range into the smart home, connected home. So you can also now go in there and buy your mobile phone from Optus, but also get the Amazon connected doorbell, or connected speakers and lights. And so they've got they're making themselves more attractive to a wider customer base, but there's some really fun ways that they're actually doing upsells and cross sells with warranty. You can get a service offering now. You can get someone to remotely help you set up your connected home, or even come out to your house and do it for you. So it's a great little way that they're combining both first party and third party to ultimately increase value, the value for the consumer, but also revenue in the door for Optus.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously the sort of same benefits apply, lower capital outlay, all that kind of thing, new revenue streams, new customers. But I think for some of those non-traditional retailers moving into this, it does add a whole kind of new revenue stream as well, isn't it? It's an interesting thing. What do you think it gives as an advantage to customers, particularly those non-traditional things? What sort of say would why is it a good thing for a Qantas customer? Just do you
Yeah,
think, for example?
for me it's convenient. Well, more than anything, you've got the points, you can use them and buy things that you need. And again, I mean, if you get a chance to have a look on marketplace.qantas.com, it's a department store. I mean, they've got
Mm,
appliances, sporting gear, apparel, luxury items. As I said, they've done some fun promotions around things like Vespers, which is mind-boggling. But it's really just convenience. So whether
mm,
it's Qantas or Optus or going to Woolworths for your groceries, it's all about convenience and trust. You get obviously more
yeah.
choice from a trusted retailer that you already, I mean, you've been shopping there no doubt for years, and it's just making it a stickier proposition.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, all the research we ever do, and done in previous marketplace reports when looking at what consumers do, convenience is almost always the top or one of the top considerations. And I think, as you've just said, that's really what drives this, isn't it? If it's convenient, they'll do it. The more convenient you can make e-commerce, the better
100%.
marketplaces happen to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned Amazon before. I'm 100% a creature of habit. I've got the Amazon app on my phone. I've got my delivery address saved, one near my office as well, so I can always just easily change it to a location convenient to me. I've got my credit card details saved, and it's literally 2 clicks and I'm purchasing. So you take
Mm,
those kind of e-commerce fundamentals and you combine that obviously with third-party range, and it's the same effect. It's a
yeah,
very convenient way of purchasing from a larger range of products.
yeah, it's huge. There are the advantages. What are the challenges, particularly for retailers, traditional and non-traditional, in trying to set up and run this kind of thing? It can't all be upsides, as they say.
No, no, it's not. I mean,
What
look,
are
it's
some of
not
the
for
challenges?
yeah, it's not for everyone. But look, I mean, the thing is that the ones that it 100% needs top-down support for sure, because a range extension strategy with third parties, it touches so many areas of the customer experience. I mean, of course, the e-commerce experience, so that experience layer, but then service interaction. I think the most common reason you call a customer service team or a support line is, where's my order? So it's an extra level of complexity when you're not only having one shopping cart and one basket that contains both first-party products being fulfilled by the retailer and their warehouses, and then a series of potentially multiple sellers fulfilling products external to the retailer. So again, there's experience layer, there's service interaction, 100%. Things I can guarantee you in life is consumers will not read terms and conditions, and they will 100% take the third-party flat panel TV that they bought into your store and want to have a return or enter that. So again, we do see a lot of people kind of taking that. I'm going to say it's probably a bit of a naive view. They want all the upside. They want to sell products from third-party sellers. They want to take a commission on the sale, but they want to be hands-off. They want to have all customer service directly between the consumer and the third-party seller. And it doesn't work that way. They're choosing to buy from a retailer because they trust you already. They've had that experience. So it's really just going into with that headspace, just knowing that this is going to touch so many other areas of your omni-channel world. So you just need to make sure that you're considering, obviously, the training, the change management knock-on effects, and plan accordingly as well.
Interesting. I guess as well, Marketplacer can help people do this.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's a big part of what we do as well. And it's interesting. I mean, it's a part of our value prop and partnership. And Marketplace was actually born. It's interesting. So 11 years ago, the company was built, but the software that we use for Marketplace today was built to power a marketplace called Bike Exchange. That was, it still is one of the world's largest bike marketplaces. The software was spun out 6 years ago, and that became Marketplacer. So we have people all throughout our organization that have lived and breathed running marketplaces. I like to say we're quite opinionated, but in a good way, to help people, kind of navigate some of those pitfalls of rolling out a marketplace strategy.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Bike Exchange, because that's sort of in some ways a sort of second-hand sort of trading site, which is one of these sort of verticals I'm seeing a lot of traction in around this sort of growth of specialist marketplaces. So marketplaces that are looking at very sort of specific niches and verticals, second-hand, vintage, those sorts of things being one of them. Are you seeing sort of a lot of interest in specific verticals, particularly ones that are based around sustainability?
Yeah, 100%. I had the pleasure of working with the Schibsted Media Group. So they're one of the largest media organisations across the Nordic region, and we've worked with them on a sustainability play and a marketplace. So they've got one of their they've got a website called fin.no in Norway, and it's one of the largest classified marketplace. But before we started working with them, it was purely peer-to-peer. So being an Australian, I could sell you my barbecue, for example, Paul. But that's an offline transaction. So Fin never got sight of the first party. They had some first party information, but not the rich information that you can expect from a checkout, delivery information, what the product was, all those different, what payment method was used, and what device. So we work with Fin and on it. Well, one thing. So we've introduced a path to purchase. So you can now go onto the Fin website, and there's a whole section that was really around reconditioned consumer electronics. So you can go there and you can find reconditioned mobile handsets, and so that stock and inventory has come from third-party sellers, approved third-party sellers that have the right to recondition and service these devices, and consumers can come to fin.no and buy reconditioned mobile handsets as well. They can even provide their own phones and submit them back through for getting credit as well. So it's a great way of, it's circular economy, and again, it's reducing consumer electronics and probably the contribution to landfill, which I think is amazing. And it's going gangbusters as well.
Yeah, no, I suppose amongst the sort of marketplaces we looked at, there are two or three within the list in Europe that do specialise in consumer electronics, and that they are all seeing a growing side of what they do being this reconditioned part of it. I think
Yeah,
consumer electronics and fashion are particularly lend themselves to sort of circular economy models. So
yeah,
that's
very much.
interesting. Yes, I feel bad that I kind of said that they were marketplaces weren't that popular in Northern Europe, and you've just given a brilliant example from Finland. But I
Yeah, and
shall I shall
it's interesting.
reevaluate my view of the North.
Yes, indeed.
Excellent stuff. So I know it's not really your specialism, but in the report we did touch on the growing sort of influence that social media sites are having. Do you think they're slowly becoming marketplaces or part of the marketplace model? Or do you think, dare I say, they might be super apps one day that transcend marketplaces? How do you
Yeah,
think social fits in?
yeah, it is. I mean, look, as saying, my space and my happy space is probably integration and connecting systems together. But
Mm,
really, for me, is we do a lot of work. We've done a lot of work in the news and in the media space as well, with people that have amazing publications, amazing websites of editorial content, and they want to, and that particular industry is more attuned with an affiliate model. That could be you could be reading an
mm,
article about the latest hiking boots for winter, and the way it works is you read the article, you click on the link, you leave the website, and you go transact somewhere elsewhere. So there's a
mm,
big trend, and this is not new. It's called contextual commerce. And the idea of making sure that you can put a path to purchase in front of a very set of engaged eyeballs. So you're reading about the obviously the hiking boots. You click, kind of an overlay slides in, and you purchase in context. Well, I mean, I kind of consider TikTok to be the same thing. Like
mm,
I'm guilty of doom scrolling on occasions, and you're potentially watching a video from someone very engaging, talking about a particular product. If you've got the ability to purchase in context, I mean, it's only going to be, only increase with the likelihood of a purchase. So again, I mean, I understand the why, and especially if you've got TikTok, you've got obviously the benefits of the social side of it, user generated content, and all those other great ways of interacting with your followers, and adding things like another engagement technique like commerce and payment. I mean, it's obvious, so yeah, 100%.
mm.
I can see that. I mean, it's already happening, and it's only going to grow as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think sort of when you sort of put it like that, it's a sort of natural progression from what they're doing already. Of course, you're going to be able to click through to buy things. Before you know it, they'll host the buying on their own TikTok or other social media platform, and then suddenly become sellers too. Sounds like everyone's becoming a marketplace, from Qantas to your telco to social media. But that I think is one of the trends we're seeing. I outlined some of the things I thought were coming down the pipe as well when I was sort of talking about the report. What are some of the other trends do you think you are seeing for 2024?
Sustainability, 100% for sure. But it's
Hmm.
interesting as well. I always like using Fat Face as an example. So, not just to be clear, not a marketplace, a customer. If you're listening, Fat Face, we'd love you to be a customer at some stage. But look, I got a real. I've been living in London. I came over here with my wife and 8-year-old about 9 months ago. And I remember looking on Fat Face, and I was like, wow, they've got such a lovely story about their sustainability journey. They're very overt with their ESG reports, and it's they really take you along the journey of sustainable supply chains, and kind of their mantra and what it means to them, and where they're trying to get to. When we start speaking to organizations like that around sustainability, they always want to understand how Marketplace as a software platform can ensure that the third party sellers and suppliers that they're onboarding are also sustainable, which is really interesting, I found. But we look at we're always innovating our platform as well, and I know some of the ways that we're tackling that at the moment is providing retailers with the tools that they have for checking someone's ESG report when they're onboarding them. There's a common thing you do
Okay.
in a marketplace context. You want to make sure the seller is who they say they are, and they're not potentially selling counterfeit goods or things like that. So there's little checks that you do called, one's an anti-money laundering check. You're doing credit checks. You're doing know your customer KYC checks. But this is just another check. You just, what's this person's ESG score? Do we want to do business with them? Are they sustainable enough? But then it's really around the trend, probably is more how you incentivize, potentially even how you gamify that experience for the seller. What happens if they're trending in the right direction and they are in fact hitting these ESG targets, or these goals that you're collectively setting together, and making sure that they're incentivized? You're potentially giving them a badge of being an eco warrior, or providing them with a lower commission rate for a period of time, whatever it might be. But that's something I think is a trend, how you're making sure that marketplaces are sustainable as a starting point. And then secondly, and this is really just around, it's common with marketplaces, if you go to a retailer to buy a product, but it's only available to be delivered to you. But again, we're seeing more and more kind of omni-channel hooks as well. So a retailer will regularly have website, stores, warehouses, call centers, all those things. So it's really, especially retailers spend so much money on their stores. There's the real estate, there's the stock, there's the people to man the stores as well. But just simple things like just making sure that there's better interactions with third-party products, and making sure those products are available potentially to be buy online, pick up, and store within the retailer store network. It drives extra foot traffic in. You've got then cross-sell and upsell opportunities around, obviously, could be a warranty or other first-party accessories. So there's some of the things we see definitely from a sustainability, and probably just helping retailers leverage more of their, very critical assets like their store network as well.
Excellent. So sounds to me like yes, sort of real world stores, online stores, and marketplaces. Everyone's going to have one. Brilliant. Well, it's been really interesting, because I think sort of as I said at the beginning, like a lot of this, the research that we do is based on the statistics we draw from retailers and consumers, but to actually hear from you, who's involved in dealing with this on a sort of daily basis, is really insightful. So, Luke, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Thank you very much for supporting the report as well. I think we've produced a really good and interesting one. So thanks a lot for doing that. Those of you watching, there is the URL for downloading the report. Please do click on it. Please do give it a read. Please do give us your feedback as to what more we can look at, what other things you need to know and find out about the marketplace world. But I shall leave it there. Luke, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your wisdom. And thank you, everyone, for watching. And goodbye.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul. All the best. Bye-bye.
You too. Goodbye.